Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, viewers, friends of Ikra TV. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I'm your host Iqbal Bana. As I keep saying to you every week, I come into your homes, invading your privacy on Monday evenings, when sometimes maybe you're busy cooking and doing some other things, or I hope the husbands are doing the washing up as well, helping their wives in their homes. But in the process, I try to bring to you people of interest and subject and issues that affect our communities on a day-to-day basis. And over the weeks and months, we've done several programs on a number of issues. Last week we did on cancer and cancer support, etc. And today I want to talk to you about something we have spoken in the past, and that is the Muslim women in prisons. Now, when I talk about this subject in my personal capacity to people, the first thing they do is look at me and think, what are you talking about? What we don't realize is there are quite a number of Muslim women who, for all sorts of different reasons, sometimes not due to a fault of their own, end up in the prison service. And Sophie Bansi, who was one of my guests who's been on this program before, has done a lot of research and produced some amazing reports which have been recognized in this country as being far productive and really a time sort of warp picture of what is happening in our communities, but also highlight some of the issues and challenges that not just only the sisters face who end up in prison, but the prison service face itself, and the community also faces, and what the community response is to some of these issues, and particularly how it impacts those people who end up in the criminal justice system. So today I have two really eminent guests. One is Sophie Bansi, who is also a Deputy Lieutenant and MBE, awarded for her work in the community as well as the work around the prison service. And as I said, this is the third report in the process of producing a fourth report of why women end up in prison in the first place, what causes women to go into prison, what are the issues and challenges, whether the custodial sentences are fair, are they Muslim women being treated differently by the criminal justice system, and some of these issues that we want to talk about when we get into the discussion. I also have Farah, a sister who has very kindly agreed to come and share her experience of ending up through the criminal justice system and being in prison for a while. I'm not going to ask her how long for, but she has now come back, mashallah, into the community and hopefully living a normal life as far as practically possible. Because one of the challenges, unlike most young men or men who end up in prison, it is far more difficult for Muslim women to rehabilitate themselves into the community. Sometimes it's the families and the communities themselves who ostracize them, and sometimes the safety nature of their particular situation makes them feel uncomfortable being back into their own community, and some are forced to move out from where they were living to other areas in order to try and make a real purposeful life for themselves. So Assalamu alaikum, Sophie, welcome back on the program, and Farah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining me. That was a very quick, brief introduction to the subject. Now, you've done a lot of research around this, Sophie, on Muslim women in prisons. I think this is the third or fourth program that I've had the pleasure of you having on here. Before is Ishtiaq Ahmed, who came and joined us as well. Now, this is an issue, I presume, that is growing. And before we went on air, you told me that of the prison population, the female prison population, 7.5%, which is quite a high percentage of prisoners, are Muslim women. So is this a growing issue that we're facing ourselves with?
It is, yes. When I first started working in the prison service about 12 years ago, it was 2013, the population then was just under 6%. So It's a slow and gradual increase. It's now 7.5%. And of course, disproportionate to what we are as communities on the outside. I think we made a mistake with Muslim men in prison. As you're aware, 18% of the prison population overall is largely made up of men, and that's nearly a fifth of the overall prison population. But we did something.
I've been using the figure 20% in the past.
Yeah, and it's nearly there. It's nearly there, Iqbal Bhai. It's nearly at 1/5, which again is greatly and hugely concerning for us as practitioners and us as a Muslim community. But what we did with the men was we slightly took our eye off the ball as Muslim men were increasing in numbers. And I think this is why people like myself, Ishtiaq Bhai, thought it was very important as we were co-researching to look at the figures, even though they were smaller in number compared to the 18% of men, and find what was happening with Muslim women. We needed to research and understand as a Muslim community what are some of the drivers to their offending. So again, concerningly, the numbers are increasing.
I mean, with men we know that they get into all sorts of nefarious antisocial activity. A lot of young people have gone in for drug dealing, for example. Some have gone in for driving convictions, etc. Now, obviously, when it comes to women, as I say, when I talk about I'm doing a program on Muslim women in prison, people look at me and think, what the hell are you talking about? Forget the word, language. But, the normal expectation is men we can understand getting involved in all these nefarious activities do find themselves in prison. What are the main reasons that Muslim women end up in prison for? What are the criminal activities that, apart from, I know you've told me this before, that some of the young women are vulnerable young women who are groomed to become drug carriers?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the statistics are showing that Muslim women are co-defendants to a man that's charged with something. So I think many of the young girls under 25, especially, we're seeing patterns of that amongst those women. Other crimes are, you say Muslim women in prison, and people think, oh, it must be something really heinous. Why else would a Muslim woman go to prison? And they ask things like, was it something really awful that they did? And to be fair, it's not. Some are very light crimes, as you may suspect, things like shoplifting. I said this last time, it's quite awful, but there's a statistic out there about the number of women that are being incarcerated for not paying their TV license.
That came as a shock to me, yes.
Yeah, and normally they're at home when somebody comes knocking. Others are circumstantial crimes, being caught up in a situation in the wrong place at the wrong time. And also, unfortunately, sometimes there are broader crimes within the family where women can then become embroiled in those crimes as an accessory or somebody who was present at the time. And they're quite often complex crimes where women then perhaps hesitate to speak out because it may be a husband involved, a brother, a father, or female members of that family, and they're taken quite aback. And again, they then do not know how to represent themselves adequately when they're there.
So these are where they might be charged by being an accessory, I presume.
Yes, rather
somebody
than
else
being
has done the crime without reporting that individual because they've stayed silent. They'll be considered as being an accessory. Yeah,
and there's big issues, Iqbal Bhai, of shame and dishonour and protecting the family name within our communities. And those crimes are quite often very complex. Of course, the mainstream system can't really look or understand those crimes, but internally, when we then work with those women, we have more of an insight as to some of the dynamics.
So does the criminal justice system, when it comes to sentencing, take account of some of those factors about, the woman did not report it because of family issues, wanting not to sort of shame the family or be seen to be the person who grasses the individual, and therefore the perpetrator actually ends up in the prison service itself?
I think it depends on the level of disclosure. I'll be honest. Courts and our judicial system works on evidence. So unless there's a disclosure, and I think that's what we try and, this is one of the reasons we're so open about the Muslim Women in Prison project and the fact that women need to be honest. Whether they're sat in a police station, whether they're in front of a judge, need to be honest and learn to protect themselves. They need to learn about things such as pre-sentencing reports. They need to learn about adequate representation, because unfortunately sometimes when they're embroiled in something broader and they think they're protecting somebody, the only person that loses out is themselves. And also there's very much a culture in our communities where women are quite often told to be silent and to not do the dirty laundry in public. So whether, that's difficult issues that we know lead women into the criminal justice system, coercion, domestic violence, grooming, they're told not to speak about those issues. And unfortunately, there isn't the level of help and support required by our women in our communities to be able to understand that or to be able to protect themselves. So there's that on one side, the fact that internally we don't speak up about this, and then generically through the system, as you're aware, David Lammy's report into disproportionate sentencing of Black, Asian, minority ethnic people, I think that was back in 2016. We also, as a Muslim Women in Prison project, gave evidence to that, and unfortunately it showed disparities for sentencing when it came to people of colour, black, brown, and I would again say Muslim. You know, when you have sisters that perhaps are entering the dock that are wearing a hijab, who are wearing a niqab, and the narratives that currently surround the Muslim community in parts can be very Islamophobic as well. So people have painted perceptions of our community in their mind. They have biases, whether they're conscious or unconscious biases, and unfortunately the judiciary is again not diverse enough to understand those cultural and faith nuances that play out for our women.
Well, we'll come back to some of those issues. Farah has been sitting there very, very patient. Farah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for coming and joining us, and thank you for being willing to share some of your experiences. Obviously, you ended up in the prison system. And then, obviously, mashallah, you're out again, and hope, rehabilitated yourself, hopefully, and that you find the support. But I mean, the process of going through the whole criminal justice system must have been absolutely traumatic, without trying to find out what was the reason why you ended up. But regardless of that, the fact that you probably were arrested, you were taken to a police cell, you were questioned, charged, and then go through the court system. How did you cope with all that?
I think
I'm assuming previously you had no criminal conviction whatsoever, no. So you were completely innocent. You have a very clean record as well, I presume.
Yeah, obviously it was first offence. It was quite scary actually, because you never imagine, like, you don't wake up one day and say you're going to go and commit an offence and then go through the police station, then courts, and then prison. So it was like a big shock to my own system. But there was a lot to take in, because I didn't know my rights. I didn't know what I was reading. It wasn't. You're in that moment where you don't know what you're going to expect, but you don't know what's going to happen, because no one's telling you what is going to happen. So there's no knowledge, because you don't read about it, especially for Muslim women. You like court, prison, police station. It's not a place for Muslim women, because they carry that family name, and then when you do go in, it's the shame behind it, and then it's the honour as well that you're breaking and losing as well.
I mean, obviously you got some legal advice from somewhere, either court-appointed legal advice or private legal advice. Did you get your own legal advice, or were you? No,
it was a duty solicitor, so it's through the police station itself.
Right. And I presume, did you feel that person, because were they Muslim or non-Muslim?
Non-Muslim.
So they probably didn't have any idea of what you were going through?
No.
No. And did you feel that hindered you, I presume?
It did a lot, because when you're there, you're taking their advice, so you don't know what's happening. So because they should know the system better than what you know, because they're there protecting you. But I think for me personally, they went the other way.
Right.
So they were telling me the negative things instead of the things that should be helping me.
Right. And do you feel that if there was a Muslim solicitor, for example, it might have been different?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
I think they could have understood the needs better and could have explained it a bit more than what to expect.
Right. And then obviously you got charged and you went to court. And again, was the system there, in your view, so suitable to understand what your challenging circumstances were?
I think they could have understood it better, because everyone had the paperwork, when from your background and what was happening. So they've got the big file, when they go to court, because they have to read about you first and then take everything into consideration. But I think a lot of them, they read it, it's just a bit of paper, they're not going to understand it.
So before this event happened with you, were you leading a normal life?
Yes.
Were you working, anything like that?
I was studying.
Oh, you were studying?
I was studying.
Right. All right. So obviously you were leading a normal life, and then suddenly found out you were charged for something and you ended up in prison.
Yes.
And then when you went into prison, how did you find the system over there?
It was very broken, but I never imagined I would ever go in there.
Right.
Because I didn't know what support was there, what was happening in there. Like, I thought it was like when you see it in the TV, in the films, like it's everybody in the same cell together. Like, that's what I literally thought. But it wasn't like that. But just didn't know what to expect when I got in there.
How did the prison staff treat you? Do you feel that they took into account?
No, I think there were more non-Muslim officers there than Muslim officers. So if there was a Muslim officer, maybe they could have understood it, but I guess it was probably a job for them because they were the officer and they had the keys. So even if you retaliated on things which weren't right, they could have locked you behind your cell. So a lot of the time you stay silent and you don't say anything, so you just hold back. So you don't really, despite you knowing that what they're doing is wrong, but they could just lock you in your cell at the end of the day because they've got the keys.
Right. So did you feel that the treatment that you were getting, was it fair or not fair compared to how other
I think it wasn't fair at all because they weren't, like, I reached out for help from them, so they kind of just left me again. They didn't really listen. There was no support. They didn't tell me what I could do or what service was available whilst in the prison.
All right. As you know, every week I say to people, this is a harrowing sort of experience today that we're talking about. If you have something that you're aware of, you know somebody who's gone into prison and had a positive or negative experience and would like to share that with us, then please ring the phone number that's on your screen, 01274 214 299. Because this is, I think, the third or fourth program I'm doing on this particular issue. Only one of them has been focusing on the Muslim men in the past, and as Sophie says, I think we took the eye off the ball some time ago. But this issue about Muslim women in prisons, the impact of that actually has on women themselves is absolutely huge from the report that Sophie has produced and her colleagues have produced, and that is the emotional and the sentimental and the physical impact it has on people like Farah can be far-reaching, aren't they? Because when you went in, did your family, I mean, you get visitation rights and things like that. Did the family come and see you? Did they come and visit you and just to ask about your welfare? Or, in some cases, I know in the past that when somebody's ended up in prison, this is in the old days, because it's seen as a badge of shame that people didn't want anything to do with them. How was your experience in relation to that?
So unfortunately, not everyone's lucky enough to have visits. So I wasn't lucky enough to have any visits. Right. So I did the full sentence without even having a visit. So the only visit I had was actually from Sophia, the Muslim Women in Prison Project, which is when she used to come and see me in education. So I didn't have any visits in terms of outside people coming in, despite Sophia's an outside person, but I used to see her in the prison.
Mm. And I mean, that obviously is quite a challenging thing in itself. When you came out of prison, obviously, whenever you came out, did you feel that you could not go back into the community that you were living in before and had to find somewhere else to go?
So I had to relocate, but sometimes people aren't lucky enough to have the support when they do come out. So relocation is a big thing, especially for me, because if I went back, I don't think I would have survived.
All right.
Especially not on my own, or I don't think I would have survived at all if I came back.
Sophie, I mean, this must be affecting virtually every Muslim woman who ends up in prison. I mean, a young man goes into prison or an adult goes into prison from a male. I mean, they come back and sometimes they're sort of worshipped as a hero or something.
Yeah,
or they'll have they have celebrations, etc. And sometimes, obviously, they have the infrastructure there. So how do Muslim women, find themselves? How do they cope with this sort of situation? Because obviously, as you said, it's a shame, within the biradari, within the community, within the structure of the family. How are they managed to cope with this sort of trauma?
I think many of them struggle. I'll be honest, many of them don't cope. The sister just alluded to the fact that it was quite self-isolating. I know many of our women struggle with mental health when they're in custody, depression. Unfortunately, some of them self-harm because there may be, emotionally some harsh words said around family dishonour. They may be cut off. And then sometimes in some cases it's encouraging to see when families are supportive and just think, okay, it's happened and let's move on. So there's both sides of the coin, but I think that's why it's important that there are projects like Muslim Women in Prison Project to be there for people like Farah, to go and visit, to let them know that somebody on the outside is thinking about them. And as you're aware, you know, Ramadan is fast approaching, and one of the things we also do as a Muslim community here in Bradford is fundraise and make sure we send the Ramadan packs into the women so they can observe that very special month, but let them know that we are there and thinking of them. But of course, many struggle because then they internalize these thoughts and feelings. They are not necessarily going to disclose how they're feeling to their padmates or the other women in the prison. That can be used against them sometimes. But I think, alhamdulillah, the Muslim chaplains that are there, mainly sisters, alimas in the prison, that's a safe outlet for them and somebody for them to speak to. Unfortunately, the wider prison staff may or may not understand. So it is a struggle. It's very much a struggle, and it's a very dark struggle, which very few people understand.
And I know the prison service is trying to recruit more and more chaplaincy with people with chaplaincy skills and knowledge in the prison service. And I'll come back to you whether you had a Muslim chaplain available to you or not. But this is another area of concern, because I know in the past there was issues about halal food, issues about prayer facilities, and, you know, and sometimes people wanted to pray. And in Ramadan, I remember, you know, years and years ago, there were some huge challenges in the prison service. And I know last year, I think Al Khair helped out with the Ramadan pack that you distributed to the prison service. I think, was it locally in this region?
It was in this region, yes.
So I think the Al Khair very kindly donated quite a number of packs so they could be distributed to all the Muslim women in prison within the Yorkshire region. I hope you found the first part of this program interesting. We'll be talking about more and more of Farah's experiences and some of the lessons that Sophie and her team have learned, and recommendations that come out of the report when we come back again. So as I keep saying to you, enjoy your tea, coffee, faluda, whatever it is. Don't go away. Inshallah, we'll be back with you soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.